Hello, welcome to CinemaBurger. I'm Scott Berger and I bring you movie reviews from a different perspective. Today we continue our Fast and the Furious series with Furious 7. Yes, we finally come past Tokyo Drift. This is the first sequel to take place after it. So before we get into the movie, let's address the elephant in the room. Paul Walker died in a fatal car crash during the filming of Furious 7. The movie was pushed back 1 year, and to finish filming, they got his brothers to do the body doubles, and they used CG for his head. It's noticeable somewhat in the movies. If you watch a lot of movies, you'll notice it, but if you're a casual movie viewer, you may not. Alright, so let's begin with the movie. We open up in a hospital room and we see Owen Shaw in a bed, sleeping, lots of bandages on him, and his body is very scarred. So apparently he survived falling out of a plane on a runway going at 150 miles an hour. Apparently Giselle couldn't survive that, but Owen Shaw did. We now look up and Jason Statham is there. It turns out he is Owen Shaw's brother, Deckard Shaw, and he's going to get revenge for the team that took out his brother. He looks down and sees the cross necklace that Owen Shaw is holding that Letty normally wears. He picks it up and he walks out of the hospital room. It seems that the hospital room has been damaged and mostly destroyed. Deckard Shaw says that even though he didn't really like his brother, he's family and he has to avenge him. As he leaves the hallways and exits the hospital, we see more and more damage. So apparently he just broke his way into this hospital, destroyed half of it, even though his brother was in there. So what if he destroyed a power line that would have cut power to the hospital? I know they have generators, but the front of the building is falling apart. Deckard Shaw basically destroyed this hospital like the Joker did in The Dark Knight, except he didn't blow it up, but he came close to it. So we cut to a desert road. Dom and Letty are driving. Letty is still trying to remember who she is, and Dom is hoping that she'll remember as they drive out to Race Wars. It's on a much bigger scale now, and there's a lot bigger fan base and crowds. Letty enters in a race, and Dom basically explains how it's going to go down because of how the guy drives his car. Letty wins, of course, and when she gets out of the car, many people cheer her and says, good to see her again. She doesn't remember them, obviously. She starts to get overwhelmed and has flashbacks. Now this is the first sequel in a while to actually have a race as one of the opening scenes. It's given the time and respect it deserves, showing the scale and spectacle of street racing. Now, there's only one major difference here is, of course, they usually show the car groupies and women's butts, that they really, really focus on women's butts. It's a good, 4-minute sequence of just people's butts with really short skirts, and you almost forget there are cars in this scene. Even when the girl is waving the race to begin, they keep flashing back to her butt. Now, James Wan steps in to direct, as Justin Lin didn't come back because of an accelerated movie schedule. So the movie does have a little different tone and feel to it because of the different director. We now cut to Brian, and he looks intense. He's about to drive, and it turns out that he's driving his kid to school. He hasn't quite settled into domestic life, and it's taking a toll on him mentally. Now, Letty and Dom go to Letty's grave where she was previously thought dead, and they're about to destroy it, but Letty says, no, the Letty you used to know died, and I'm someone else now. And she kind of leaves Dom, it seems, because she still can't remember what happened to her and who she is. But there's no time for emotion. We have to get to bald people punching each other. So Deckard Shaw starts to take out Dom and his crew. He starts with Hobbs. So we cut to a DHS office, and Hobbs and Elena are finishing up paperwork. And Elena leaves. Hobbs stays behind to finish one thing, and all of a sudden he hears someone sitting at a keyboard. It's Shaw, and he talks about for the crew that took out his brother. Now, Hobbs says it was only him, and the two start to fight. Now, James Wan is used to directing and producing horror movies, but he can shoot action pretty well. Now, Hobbs and Shaw throw each other through multiple glass tables and walls, but they're both fine, and they keep punching and fighting each other. James Wan uses this camera effect where he spins it 180 degrees as someone is getting thrown to the ground, and that's a pretty cool effect. He uses it a couple more times in the movie. Now, as the fight escalates, Shaw throws some sort of grenade at Hobbs, and it throws him out of what looks like a 40-story window. Elena had come back to hear what's going on, even though she had to basically run back up a 40-story building in 2 minutes, but she did it somehow. And as the explosion goes off, Hobbs shields Elena, and they both fall out of this building. Now, they land on a car, Hobbs on the bottom, so Elena is fine. And Hobbs survives falling out of a 40-story building. I mean, I know you're The Rock and you're indestructible, but, like, everyone has limits. Now, as the wreckage clears, we see what Deckard Shaw was looking at on the computer, and it's Han and his profile. So he's going after Han next, which leads back to the end credit scene from Fast and the Furious 6. Now, also, if you look clearly at the screen, it says one of Han's aliases. His name is Han Solo, like Han Solo. Come on. So we cut back to the Toretto house, and Brian, Letty, Mia, and their son Jack are there with Dom. And there's this package delivered from Japan, so they think Han sent Dom a present or something. Now, we cut back to Japan. We see the infamous scene from Tokyo Drift again where Han crashes and dies. And now we see Shaw calling Dom from Dom's side now. And he says, "Dominic Toretto, you don't know me, you're about to." And as you see Han's car explode in the background, we cut back to the Toretto house, and now the box is ticking, and the box explodes. It turns out it was a bomb, and it blows up the Toretto house. Brian and Mia look over to see Jack because he was in their minivan, and he's okay, thankfully, but they've been attacked on their own turf. So now Dom goes to Japan to get Han's body. So now we cut back to the ending scene from Tokyo Drift where we see Sean and Twinkie as they're now the leaders of the street racing crew in Tokyo. And it's still the original footage from 2006. So now we cut to after the race, and it's new footage now. We see Sean as he's talking to Dom about Han. Now, since the movies were filmed 10 years apart between Tokyo Drift and Furious 7, it's painfully obvious that Lucas Black, who plays Sean, is a lot older, and he's still supposed to be 17 and in high school. Also, the fact that since Tokyo Drift takes place during Furious 7, and Furious 7 came out in 2015, that means that Tokyo Drift took place in the year 2015. So what's the explanation for all of the outdated technology? I guess that happens when you retroactively move a movie in chronological order. But Dom and Sean talk about Han. They find Han's bag with a picture of Giselle in it. And we find the necklace that Deckard left behind at the wreckage. And he gives it back to Dom. So now he comes back to America and they have a funeral for Han. So after Dom returns from talking to 30-year-old high school student Sean Boswell, we come back to have Han's funeral, and the whole crew is there. We see Letty, Mia, Brian, Roman, and Tej, and also Deckard Shaw is in the background in his car. Now, they're all wearing suits from the funeral. Dom sees Deckard out of the corner of his eye, and he goes after him. Now, immediately we cut to Dom driving after Deckard, and he's in now a gray collared shirt. He wasn't wearing that underneath his suit, so I guess he changed in 30 seconds after getting in the car. Now, Dom follows Deckard through the city, and they stop at this, it looks like a kind of a parking garage or an abandoned under of a bridge, and they both start talking. It's like, Deckard says we're from different worlds, and stuff like that, and he says, "You think this is going to be a street fight?" Now, before they start talking, they're both in their cars staring at each other. They're facing each other, and they're revving up their engines, and they literally drive right into each other, head first, at full speed. And also it takes like a minute and a half for them to even hit each other, even though they're both driving toward each other, but I guess they're living in slow motion world or something. So after they both survive with no injuries at driving full speed head on into each other, they both get out of their cars, and they show that Deckard's car has been reinforced with steel, and Dom's car hasn't, even though it seems pretty okay. It's crunched a lot, but still. So as Dom and Deckard Shaw are about to fight, we hear gunshots and people coming down from helicopters and tow lines, and a bunch of people in black suits. Deckard gets away, and we reveal Kurt Russell is the head of this organization. Now, he says, "Call me nobody," because Dom asks who he is. And it turns out that they have a mutual friend, Hobbs. So Hobbs sent this government group to help Dom and the team since he's stuck in the hospital and he can't legally help them because of reasons. And also Hobbs explains to Dom in the hospital who Deckard Shaw is. He was a Black Ops military person who went rogue, and since his mission wasn't needed anymore, he just became a mercenary for hire. So Mr. Nobody tells Dom he knows him and he's seen his work in the past, and that they both can help each other. Now, it turns out that they're looking for this device called the God's Eye. Now, this is similar to the device they were looking for in Furious 6, where it can, like, infiltrate and hack all technology at once and do anything it wants. So it's basically the MacGuffin device of this movie. So, Mr. Nobody says that in exchange for their help getting this God's Eye device, that they'll help Dom and the team get Shaw. So basically this movie has become Mission Impossible now because this government organization has unlimited resources to give to Dom and the team. So they can get anything they want now, pretty much. Now when they get back to Mr. Nobody's government warehouse, he's already called in the rest of the team. Brian, Mia, Roman, Tej, and Letty shows up at the end. Now, she came to help because she knew it was right, even though she still doesn't remember things. So Mr. Nobody explains that the creator of the God's Eye, codenamed Ramsey, is being held hostage by this warlord played by Jahaman Hutsu, and that they have to infiltrate the country as Zirkistan, I think, to get Ramsey and the God's Eye back. So Mr. Nobody explains that it's in a heavily guarded area and they can only enter through one certain spot, but Roman is like, why do that? We can come here in this spot, because he feels he wants to be leader of the team. Basically in these movies now, Roman has become the comic relief. So when Roman points to a random spot on a map and says we should enter here because it's heavily guarded and that no one will expect that, Tej says, I actually have a plan. So now we cut to cars in an airplane. So they're basically going to jump cars out of an airplane. Now it's interesting because in other countries this movie was called Sky Mission because of that scene and image on the poster. So they're all in heavily souped up cars because Mr. Nobody has all cars and things at their disposal. Now Dom sees this armored car and sports car and he says, I want to be able to combine the two. So we cut back to the plane, and they're all getting ready to jump out of the plane. So each car goes out of the plane. It's basically free-falling, and then they press buttons to activate parachutes. And then they all land safely on the ground, except for Roman because he didn't want to get out of the plane, so Tej had a backup parachute in case Roman would chicken out, which he knew he would. So Roman is kind of just flying off in the background as everyone else lands safely on the road. We have Dom, Brian, Letty, and Tej. Now all their cars are pretty souped up, and the driving scenes in this particular sequence are pretty well done and impressive. They all get in a single line and they come to a bus. Now this bus is holding Ramsey and the God's Eye. So as they're catching up to the bus has machine guns in it, so as it opens up and shoots the cavalcade, Tej gets out in front because he has the most armored car, so he blocks the bullets coming at them. Now that's actually a pretty smart move and clever. Now, in terms of all of the action scenes in this movie, they're all pretty ridiculous. This scene is probably the most believable, and that's not saying much. So now Dom and the team use harpoons to break open the back of the bus, and they get Ramsey out. Now, Ramsey is played by Nathalie Emmanuel from Game of Thrones. And we have Tony Jaa as one of the henchmen, and it's interesting that Tony Jaa does a lot of fighting with Brian O'Connor. Now, even as much training as Brian O'Connor has had with hand-to-hand combat, he still realistically couldn't beat Tony Jaa. Because Tony Jaa is an Indonesian mixed martial arts fighter, and it's clearly that he's holding back during these fights, but that's because of the actor. Now, throughout this movie, Brian O'Connor has been doing increasingly dangerous stunts, just as Giselle had done in Fast and the Furious 6. Now, this is one of the most character development areas we have in the movie, since the plot of this movie is very lean, because we gotta keep going from one action scene to the next and not have time to really have a lot of dialogue. They still kind of have Letty trying to remember, but that's really not the main focus of this movie anymore. It's pretty much action set piece to action set piece. Now, as Dom and the team are trying to get Ramsey out of this bus, Deckard Shaw shows up again on a totally unrelated matter. Now, just like in Fast 5, Dom and the team are being attacked from two separate enemies having nothing to do with each other. They were attacked by Hobbs and then also Ernesto Reyes in Fast 5. Now here they're being attacked by the Warlord and Deckard Shaw, but the two are unrelated until later on. So as Deckard is trying to take out Dom and the other team, Roman finally lands and actually starts to help for once. So they accidentally kill the bus driver as Tony Jaa and Brian fight, and the bus ends up flipping over and turning sideways. Now Brian and Tony Jaa are still in the bus, and Tony Jaa jumps out of it. Now the bus, of course, is heading toward a cliff because only chase scenes happen on mountainsides, I guess. So the bus is hitting the edge of the cliff, and Brian is hanging from the front of the bus as it's tipping over. He climbs up the door and gets on top of the bus, and he's running up across the bus as it's falling off of a cliff, and Letty drives up and is there to catch him. Now, first of all, Brian would not be able to run fast enough to get up the falling bus and then jump off of it with enough momentum to get back onto the ledge. And surprisingly, when the bus falls off the cliff, it doesn't explode, because everything else in this movie explodes. So now, Dom is the only one left. He has Ramsey in his car. He's cornered by the Warlord and his crew, and he's facing the Warlord and the other cars, and his back is toward the ledge of this cliff. So now he spins around, creating some smoke. Now this also stops Deckard from shooting him with a sniper rifle that he has. As he's running to a vantage point, he puts it together. So now he's facing the cliff ledge, and Ramsey says, "You're facing the wrong way," and Dom says, "Am I now?" This coming up is probably the dumbest scene that has happened in a Fast and the Furious movie to date. He literally drives off the cliff. He just drives off of it. Like, there's no parachute or anything. So as he's falling off the cliff, he starts hitting the side of the cliff, and his car is getting fucked up and destroyed. And as they get to the bottom, they survive. So it turns out, back in the warehouse with Mr. Nobody, Dom had the most armored car of all, but I don't care how much armor and protection you have in your car. If you drive it off of a cliff, you are going to die. I don't care. You are going to die. But of course, they're fine. There's no scratch on them. So as they recover from that ordeal, they figure out what the next move is. So Ramsey explained that she mailed the God's Eye device to a friend in Abu Dhabi for safekeeping. So now it's off to Abu Dhabi in the next action set piece, I guess. So they get to Abu Dhabi, and they reveal that the friend of Ramsey gets him into this party. It turns out that he sold the device because it was put in a sports car. So the friend of Ramsey sold the sports car to like some prince, and he has it in this hotel. It's 3 large buildings, and they're in the desert. It's 3 large buildings, and it's in one of the penthouses. So okay, they have to get into this hotel and steal the God's Eye back. Now, as they're going to Abu Dhabi, Dom talks to Brian about how you have a family now and you shouldn't be doing such dangerous stunts right after having done the bus scene. Now, this is good development, I think, because Brian is basically kind of like an adrenaline junkie now, where he gets his thrills from doing these dangerous heists and action scenes. So, as they infiltrate the hotel, Roman is set to create a diversion because he talks a lot, that's what he does. So, there's a bunch of henchmen, and we see Ronda Rousey. Now, Letty is going to fight Ronda Rousey because Letty fought Gina Carano in the previous movie, so they continue having her fight strong women, which is cool. Now, I know Ronda Rousey is not an actress. She's been in maybe 1 or 2 other movies. But she has the most robotic delivery of the few lines that she has out of anyone I've ever seen. So now they fight. The fight's pretty good. At one point, they both fall off a balcony, and they're both fine, even though they fall on a table. But as they're doing that, Tej is telling Brian and Dom where the car is. So the car is pretty small. I mean, it's the size of a regular car, but it's small. So Tej tells them you gotta find the chip somewhere. So Dom literally lifts up the car. Like, I know it may be weight because Brian says the car can do like 0 to 60 in 0.3 seconds. But you gotta be pretty strong to just lift up a car. Like, I feel like maybe Dwayne Johnson could do that, but Vin Diesel with his fit, fat body, I don't know. So as he's lifting up the car, Brian is trying to find the God's Eye device. And this is all while the fight scene and the diversion in the main room is happening. So basically Dom is holding up this car for like 5 minutes. His face is turning as red as the car is, and he's getting veins all in his head. So they find it in the glove compartment, or in a computer in the front of the car. And now they need to escape because the people have been alerted that they're there. Now as they're looking for the device, Brian and Dom talk about how it's a shame to keep such a nice car in a penthouse. And Dom talks about how you're keeping a beast caged. Now, as they're about to drive away in the car, Dom says one of the most cheesy lines ever. He says, "Time to unleash the beast," as they drive the car through a door and they're driving in the hotel area. So as they're driving through this floor of the hotel, they're trying to evade gunshot. Then they drive a car through the window of the building, and they drive it into another building. Now, I don't care if a car can do 0 to 60 in 0.3 seconds. Physics still apply here. But I think the Fast and the Furious universe has thrown away physics and gravity a long time ago. So they drive this car. Now, it makes sense at least that they're driving and the car falls to a lower level of the second building. So they land wheel first into the second building now, and apparently the brakes have stopped. So they can't stop. So they're still driving, and they're destroying these other statues that are in this building. I guess there's like a museum there or something. So as they're driving, they realize they have no brakes. And before they had even jumped the building, Brian is like, "Cars can't fly, Dom." "No, they can't, Dom. They just fall." So they're in the second building, and they keep going, and then they drive through the window into the third building. So they've jumped the car through not 1, but 2 buildings. Now, of course, they still land, and they have the God's Eye in their hand, and Brian rolls out of the car as it's heading toward a window, and Dom barely makes it out of the car, and he's hanging on off the ledge a little bit, and the car falls out of the third building, and it gets, like, crunched. So while this whole scene of the car jumping out of the two buildings, I mean, it doesn't look bad, but you can tell it's CG and it looks like a video game cutscene. Now, that wouldn't be a problem if you were playing like a video game, but this is a movie, and it looks pretty noticeable that this is a CG effect. Oh yeah, so during this whole car jumping through building scene, Shaw has found them again, and he's trying to kill them again. He somehow keeps finding where Dom and his team are going to be. So when Dom and his team finally have a minute to relax, they meet up with Mr. Nobody again, and they use the God's Eye to find Shaw. Now, this is a trap because Shaw is just kind of sitting eating dinner, and as he's wiping his face with a napkin, he pulls a grenade pin out of his mouth. So Shaw has now teamed up with the Warlord, and they start attacking Dom and the crew. So now, as all this is happening, Mr. Nobody puts on these night vision glasses, and he starts shooting and stopping the bad guys. So this is actually a pretty cool moment, but it's cut short as Mr. Nobody is shot. So now, as Dom sees this, Mr. Nobody winks at him and falls. So once they get out of there and regroup, Mr. Nobody pulls open his shirt, and there's some sort of weird vest. It kind of looks like he has a mattress taped to his shirt. To his stomach, and it kind of looks like bird feathers. It kind of reminds me of the Birdman suit from the movie Birdman with Michael Keaton. But he's fine. He calls in a helicopter. So now they have to stop Shaw and the Warlord. Now, since the Warlord has the God's Eye, they basically go home to regroup. So now as they're wondering what they're going to do, they keep looking at the city streets, and Dom says, "We'll use our own turf." So they're going to set a trap for Shaw and the Warlord in the streets of LA, where these movies once took place and street racing once happened. So as the whole team is looking over at the LA cityscape, we see like a bandage on his arm, so I guess jumping a car through two buildings and falling off a cliff just warrants a single arm cast. So now as we're getting ready for the final fight, there's a montage of Dom loading up and getting ready as well as Shaw. Now they cut back and forth between the two, and it's edited pretty well. Now apparently in between Fast and Furious and coming home at the end of Fast and Furious 6, Dom rebuilt his signature Dodge Charger. So apparently the Warlord has a drone. They're going to use the drone against Dom and his team. So the plan is Ramsey is going to remotely hack the God's Eye device and either shut it down or somehow steal it back. So what their plan is kind of genius a little bit, because while the God's Eye seems to have everyone's location, they keep switching cars, jumping out of cars, and moving Ramsey around. There's one scene where Brian has Ramsey in his car, and he says, "Let's go old school," and he's driving behind an 18-wheeler truck, and he drives underneath the tractor trailer wheels. Now this is reminiscing the original Fast and the Furious, and we see that was the first action stunt. So it's nice to see that scene again and remember when these movies were about people stealing DVD players and street racing and not about driving cars off of cliffs and out of buildings. So of course we want to see the ultimate showdown between Dom and Deckard. So once again they have their two cars, and they're on top of a parking garage, and they're both ready. So once again, they drive at each other full speed, head on into each other. And this time, Dom's car, he does kind of like a wheelie, so his car kind of eats like Shaw's car. Like he's hungry, like nom nom nom. So all this time, the Warlord is using this drone to try to shoot down Dom and his team. And the drone hits this parking garage that Dom and Deckard are in. So Hobbs is apparently in a hospital in LA, and he sees all this fighting and mayhem going on in the city. So he realizes he has to go back to action. Now he's still pretty hurt and bandaged up. His arm is in a big cast, but I guess he decides he's done being injured, and he literally flexes out of his cast. And he tells his daughter, "Daddy's got to go to work." So after Dom and Deckard have rammed each other for the second time, they both have armored cars, I guess, so because they're both fine. Deckard rips off pieces of windshield wiper blade off of his car, and he's getting ready to use them like batons. And Dom pulls out two comically oversized wrenches out of his back seat. And now, repeating the line from earlier, Deckard says, "You thought this was going to be a street fight?" And Dom originally has a shotgun in his hand. He fires it once, throws it down, and he says, "You're goddamn right it is." So they both have their weapons. They're running at each other in slow motion. Epic music is playing. And they're jump up in the air at each other as they're about to fight. Like, I thought these movies were about cars and street racing, but now we're having gladiatorial fighting. As dumb as it is, it's pretty epic, I'm not gonna lie. So we cut back to Hobbs. He's apparently stolen a ambulance to go help Dom and the team. So what if the hospital needed that ambulance? Like, what if there was someone dying from all the mayhem that they've caused throughout the city? They've pretty much caused more damage than good in the city of LA, based on their driving and the drone shooting people and everything. So multiple people, innocent people, are dead because of them. So throughout the city, Dom and the team, they've been using their cars to move Ramsey around. There is one really cool scene where they're driving, two cars are driving at each other. Brian is in one car with Ramsey, and Tej is in another car. Two cars, they spin around simultaneously, and they kind of throw Ramsey into the car. Now, this is a pretty well done scene, because I think it was actually done with stunts and not CG. So that's the one really other cool scene in this movie that's not inherently dumb. So, Hobbs, we go back to Hobbs. He sees the drone coming, and he sees it, I'm not sure, but he drives the ambulance off of a bridge, jumps out of the ambulance, and the ambulance knocks out the drone. And then he climbs down, he picks up the minigun that the drone has, and he's going to use it now. Now, this isn't a regular minigun that you can shoot, I don't think. It's attached to a drone that's controlled electronically, so I don't think you can just start shooting the gun, but he's Dwayne Johnson, he can do what he wants, I guess. So he's using this minigun, even though it shouldn't technically be working, because he's not even pressing any buttons, it's just kind of holding it as it's shooting. So now we have the other showdown. We have Brian fight off Tony Jaa again. Now, Brian is trying to take down some signal tower so they can use hacking to get to God's Eye. Now, Tony Jaa comes up and he's fighting Brian again. Now, realistically, Tony Jaa would have won this fight, but it looks like when he's fighting him, he's kind of showing off, doing exuberant flips and extravagant moves, but if he wasn't too busy showing off, he would have won. So at one point, they run at each other, and they're sliding down a door down a flight of stairs. Now, Brian is on the bottom. He would have cracked his head multiple times, but as they're fighting, Brian ties a string to Tony Jaa's leg and pushes a cinder block that's attached to down an elevator shaft, and Tony Jaa falls down. As he's falling, Brian says, "Too slow," like in the beginning during the bus scene when Tony Jaa got out of the bus, leaving Brian to his death. So after the drone has been destroyed, the Warlord is really pissed off, so he uses the helicopter he's in to shoot at the parking garage where he sees Dom and Deckard fighting. Now, up until then, the Warlord and Deckard have been on the same side, but now that is ended. So he's shooting the parking garage as it's crumbling a little bit under them. So as Dom and Deckard are fighting, they lose their weapons, they're both punching each other a lot. And as the ground is crumbling, Dom says probably the most cheesy line of the movie, and that's saying something because he says some stupid stuff in this. Dom says, "You know what they say about a street fight?" And the ground is crumbling right under Deckard. The street always wins. And he stamps down, cracking the ground underneath Deckard. He falls down. He's out for good. But we still have to deal with the Warlord. Now, so Dom sees there's this backpack full of grenades. He looks up at the parking garage, and there's kind of like a ramp set up. based on the destruction. So he figures out this jump in his head, like he's about to play Hot Wheels. So he takes the backpack, he gets in his car, he drives around, he drives off this makeshift ramp, he drives up to the helicopter, he kind of gets near the feet of the helicopter, he drives toward it, he hits it kind of and goes down. Now, he's like, his car is sideways and he just crashes and he's flipping over and he's unconscious now. Now it turns out that he stuck the grenade backpack on the helicopter. So that blows up, he's killed the warlord. But now Dom is possibly dead. So Hobbs and Letty and everyone else go to the wreckage. Now Hobbs pulls a couple of cinder blocks out of the way. One of them looks really made out of styrofoam because it looks a little too easy to move. But they're trying to perform mouth-to-mouth on Dom and wake him up. Now, apparently, Letty has been having flashbacks throughout the movie of remembering things, and it turns out she remembers everything now. She remembers Dom and Letty's wedding, and she remembers how she died, where she got hit by the explosion near the car that Phoenix shot the car instead of her back in Fast and Furious. So apparently they show the wedding scene. Now, Letty's in a nice white dress. She looks fine. And Dom is just in a wife beater and white pants. You don't even bring a suit to your own wedding? How, like, cheap is that? And apparently they didn't have a ring, so they use the cross necklace as the wedding ring. So Letty kind of holds Dom and, like, wills him back to life with, like, Disney magic tears. So Dom wakes up and everyone is fine. Now, after this whole stunt, he kind of has like a scratch on his head, so he's been hurt somewhat. So Hobbs put Shaw in prison. He's behind bars now and he can't do much. So now we cut to a beach. We see Brian and Mia playing with their son Jack, and we see the rest of the team, Dom, Letty, Roman, and Tej, in the background. Now, they've been hinting throughout the movie that Brian has been doing increasingly dangerous things and that he can't keep doing this life anymore. Now, in addition to the fact that Paul Walker died, unfortunately, they give him an ending that doesn't kill him off, but gives him like a tasteful send-out of these movies. So Dom talks about to Letty how Brian and Mia can't be in this life anymore. They need to raise their family. That's what his mission is now. So Dom kind of drives away. He doesn't even like say goodbye. And then all of a sudden, as he's at an intersection, we see Brian drive up next to him. And Brian says, "You weren't going to leave without saying goodbye, were you?" And a really sad song plays. And this is honestly a really touching scene. They're both driving together and then the road splits and they both go their separate ways, indicating that they both have different lives to live. Now you hear Vin Diesel voiceover saying, "You were always my brother and I'll love you forever." And then the movie ends and the movie says, "For Paul." And then we see some flashbacks of Dom and Brian together from the first couple of movies. We see how they've aged and grown together, how their family got bigger, and it's a really touching ending. I didn't think a Fast and the Furious movie could make me tear up, but when I originally saw it, it did. So that was Furious 7. In terms of action and stunts, it's definitely the most ridiculous, and it's extremely over the top, and I didn't think they could top Fast and Furious 6, but they did. I'd have to give this movie 2 out of 5 burgers because of how over the top the stunts are, even for Fast and the Furious standards. The character development and plot is very scaled back in this movie, and they make more room for action scenes, which is something they don't typically do in the Fast and the Furious movies, but they did this time. For the first time in about 4 movies, we had a different director. We had James Wan. Now, he directs a competent movie. You can see all the action, and he does the 180-degree angle flip scenes anytime someone is thrown to the ground. They do it in the beginning when Hobbs and Shaw fight, again when Dom and Shaw fight. Now, they handled the Paul Walker issue very tastefully. They could have done a lot worse. A lot of people I've talked to said they should have just killed him off, but I think killing off the character would have been in poor taste, and just having the character end this lifestyle is better done. And having the two cars drive off apart in the sunset was pretty well done. So now, did this movie even need to be made? I don't think so, because they had killed off Owen Shaw as we thought in the Fast and the Furious 6, but there was still, I guess, the loose end to tie up with Tokyo Drift and Han's death. Now, they could have kind of just left Han's death to be a random accident, and then, I guess, have Vin Diesel showing up at the end to tell Sean that Han was part of his crew. But you didn't really need to do anything after that, I don't think. Because having... Now, they mentioned in Furious 6 that Owen Shaw had a brother. He mentioned that he gave him advice. But we didn't really need to see him, I don't think. Like, okay, it's cool having Deckard Shaw be the reason that Han is dead and that it wasn't an accident. It was planned, but there was really no reason for these movies to continue. They basically became Mission Impossible movies because they have the Shadow Organization headed by Mr. Nobody giving them unlimited resources. And it just kind of gets ridiculous. So next time we'll talk about The Fate of the Furious, where they introduce an architect behind a lot of things happening in the previous movies. So we'll see you next time. I'm Scott Berger, and have a good night.